All right, question 3. I find myself always settling for the guy that wants me, knowing in my heart that he is not the guy, but I feel like that's my only option. One more time. I find myself always settling for the guy that wants me, knowing in my heart that he is not the guy, but I feel like that's my only option.
Okay. You know, when you talk about the one, you know, it's a mystery. Like, man, you know, my one is out there, right? You know, people thinking like, you know, that type of thought, and the trap is for us to not trust God with our companion, not to trust God that God don't know how to bring in that husband or that wife. That settling is the fruit of weariness. Settling is a fruit of impatience. Settling is a fruit of whatever. And so what happens is you feel like that's your only option because you're looking around like, well, hey, that's the only dude around me that read his Bible. You know what I'm saying? That's the only girl that knows at least 5 scriptures. You know what I'm saying? So God surely can't bless me with someone better than this, you know? And we get so consumed with, well, okay, I'll work with this one. And if you get into a marriage with that person, God will work that thing, because if 2 people are submitting themselves and they wasn't meant for each other, but God will work that together nonetheless. But what I'm trying to say for that person specifically is you got to trust God with that. We live in a culture where everybody booed up. See, men lie, women lie, numbers don't. Statistically, divorce is high. The divorce rate is high. It's high for a reason. So we get so caught up looking up, and it's springtime. Oh my God, everybody getting married. You know, Hallmark talking about the wedding special in June and stuff. And so what's happening is they're conditioning us to want to be with someone. It's like this, I gotta have someone. See, if you're not satisfied, if you're not content in your number 1 relationship, you will not be satisfied in relationship number 2. And if you're not content with God and being whole in Him, see, when you're in God, your discernment raises. Mm-hmm. When you're with God, that ain't it. You know what I'm saying? You know, I'm not going to allow myself to engage further. Now, some of us are deep in some stuff, and that's whatever. But what I'm saying is you don't have to worry about, hey, man, this is good enough. This is good enough for me to get by. This is a better option than last. It's like, no, God, before I engage with someone else, let me ask myself, am I ready? And God, is this the one? And sometimes you got to pull yourself out of a situation sometimes. Let me see the question again. I find myself always settling for not glory, but for the guy, okay, that wants me. Not everybody that wants you, you should give access to. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, it doesn't matter if they want you, because everybody has motives. What do they want you for? See, listen, I always tell people, when someone comes to your life, ask who sent them. You know, because a person is only going to come from 1 or 2 influences, demonic or God. They're going to come from one. Either the devil going to send them or God going to send them. And the thing about it is, a person who the devil sends always comes. The counterfeit always comes before the real. And what happens is we sell them for counterfeits. Just because it look good, smell good, talk good, and walk good doesn't mean it's good for you. Even if they're a man of God on times 10, a woman of God, it don't matter. Just because she's good, just because he's good, does that mean they're good for you? Because you made her path is that way, your path is that way, and you're going to have a confused purpose in the middle. Because what God puts together can't be separate. But if you with someone that's going like this, I don't think God put it together. I find myself always settling for the guy that wants me, knowing in my heart that he is not the guy, but I feel like that's my only option. Man, do you love you? A person who loves themselves don't allow anybody access to them. Are you okay with you, young lady? When you look in the mirror, do you see beauty? Or do you see pain? Do you see struggle? Because when you look at that mirror, you look at yourself and say, man, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. That God, I will wait however long, because what you have me waiting for will be worth the wait. And many of us get weary in waiting. The Bible says, they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. And for those who's been with me long enough, you know the revelation of that. People think that if I wait on God, meaning if I sit still, then my strength would be renewed. No, the meaning is that if I wait as a waiter, serve God, that's how my strength is renewed. And what happens is we're so busy waiting, tapping our feet, versus serving him at his feet. And so what we have to do is say, God, I will wait however long for your promise. Are you willing to wait? Because if God brings your husband a week or a month or a year too soon into your life, I'm just talking about hypothetically. I'm going to scratch that. God is working on both of y'all for that special moment when y'all supposed to walk together. If you're walking together, he got a limp and you got a limp too, y'all going to be some messed up looking people walking down some aisle. You got to ask yourself, bruh, are you whole? Girl, are you whole? Because if we're both leaking, it's going to be a bloody mess down to that altar. And if God will not bring two, I don't think God would bring two people together for matrimony if they're not content in God and whole in God. And I could be wrong. Y'all could throw stones. I'm just saying. I think that God will not, don't throw. But what I'm trying to say is that if you're not content in God, you got to be content in the level and the stage you're in. If you're not content with being single, God will not, you can settle for someone, but God will not bring the one. Because if you're not content with God, in love with God, God is only going to bring your man when you forget that that man even exists. God's not going to bring that woman, that man in your life until you are okay, until you're not even thinking about marriage. If you're still thinking about marriage, you're still thinking about love, you're still thinking about, man, I just want my Boaz, I want my boo, I want my sugar mama, you know what I'm saying? You want that? God's not going to bring something that you're mentally consumed with because that thing has now became your idol. God's not going to bless hands who's going to bring their gifts in the feet of another idol. So if the question is marriage your idol? Is love your idol? Is being able to walk into the wedding party and pick out a dress your idol? Is the imagery that society has built about marriage, is that your idol? That's all I'm going to say about that.
I'm going to read the question again. I find myself always settling for the guy that wants me, knowing in my heart that he is not the guy, but I feel like that's my only option. I'm going to speak from experience on this one. Before I really got saved and really started living for Christ and doing things for him, I was in a particular relationship and I knew that this guy was not it and he knew he wasn't it. We just kind of ignored that. I stayed in the situation, and part of it was that at the time I did feel that was my only option. I did feel like due to certain circumstances, I felt like that was my best option at that point. He had met the family, everybody, nobody had beef with him. My brothers, everybody was cool with him. So I was like, all right, this'll work. He's a good guy, got a good job. He's got pastors like in his family, so he must know a couple of scriptures like John 3:16 or something. Like I made myself believe that right, he knew that Jesus wept. So I was like, all right, he's a good guy. We can do this. Let's go. Let's get married. So I knew that it wasn't going to work, but I kept trying to convince myself that it was going to work. And so the first thing is, if you have to convince yourself or talk yourself into it, spend that energy and just talk yourself out of it. Like, why would you and being serious, like, why would you want to, if you have to spend all that time and make a list of why you should be with this person when you know in your heart that that's not who you're supposed to be with, like, just cut it short. Just don't even do that. But the question says, I find myself settling for the guy that wants me, knowing in my heart that he's not the guy for me, but I feel like that's my only option. At that point in my life, I was not in a place where I understood or even felt like I was worth anything. Like my self-worth, my self-esteem was just not at all. I didn't get the fact that God saw me as somebody. I didn't get the fact that, like, I knew that he died for me, but I didn't get it. I hadn't grasped it yet. It didn't make sense to me. It didn't mean anything to me. So when people were like, well, Danielle, you shouldn't be with that guy because you're worth more. It bounced off a brick wall because it didn't make sense to me at the time. And so for me, what I had to do was take my eyes off of him, take my eyes off of myself, because again, I didn't have the self-esteem or the self-worth to say, you know what, I do deserve better. You are not my only option. I had to focus on someone or something that I did care about more than him. And at that time, it wasn't God, because again, I was thinking about getting saved, but I wasn't ready to do it. And so for me, what I had to do was I had to think about my future kids. And I had to say, you know what? I want to be a mother one day. I want to be a mother so bad. Like, I want kids. I love kids. I want to have kids, all of that. And I said, if I marry this man and I have kids with him, my daughters are going to grow up and they're going to learn what a man is from this man. And he's not a terrible guy. He just ain't it. So I said, my daughters are going to learn what it means to be a man from him. And they're going to go out in this world and they're going to look for a man to love them the way that daddy loves them and the way that daddy loves mommy. And daddy wasn't really, well, he wasn't daddy. I'm sorry to take that back. But at the time, he wasn't loving me the way that a father should love a wife or a husband should love a wife. And I thought about my future sons and I said, my sons are going to learn what a man is from this man. And they're going to go out in the world and they're going to become just like him. And they're going to treat other women the way that their father, hypothetically, is treating their mother, hypothetically. And I said, I love my unborn children so much more than I love myself, so much more than I love this man. And I value them so much more than I value this relationship, or so much more than I value the fact that I want to be married. I put them first before me because I don't have the self-esteem. At the time, I didn't have the self-esteem to say, I'm going to get out of this thing for me. And I had to get out of that thing for my unborn children because I didn't want to bring daughters in the world that's what they looked up to, or sons in the world that's what they looked up to. So it's very easy for us to sit up here and say, know your worth and you're worth more than that. But for a lot of us right now, that means absolutely nothing, because a lot of us don't love ourselves. And a lot of us, we're not to a place where we can grasp that and internalize that and live off of that. So I encourage you, and this may sound a little backwards, but I encourage you that maybe you don't want to have kids. Maybe there's something else in your future that right now you can say, you know what, I'm honestly not in a position to get out of this thing for me, or to love myself enough to wait and be content in God. But maybe I can do this for this thing or for that thing. And it's not you idolizing your unborn children, not you idolizing whatever it is. It's you valuing that thing more than you value your idol of you being in a relationship. So I hope that made sense.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. I was looking up Ephesians 3:20 says, now unto him that is able to do exceedingly and abundantly over and above all that we could ever ask or think, according to the power that worketh in us. So God will do exceedingly abundantly over all that we could ever ask or think, but many times we settle. And see, for guys and girls, God sees you as $1 million. He sees you as $1 million, but too many times we settle for $25. And people, we discount ourselves. And all God wants us to do, he wants us to see ourselves the way he sees us. He wants us to become, like they said, complete and whole with him. Because when you understand and see how God sees, you'll pick who God wants you to pick. And you'll be with who God wants you to be with, because you're able to discern, you'll be able to understand the way he sees, the way he understands. And I was thinking about the story where there was a father who brought his son to the disciples, and the disciples were trying to pray for him, and the son he was demon possessed, and the disciples were unsuccessful with their prayers. And then Jesus came onto the scene, and he said, why are y'all, what's going on? And the disciples couldn't do it. So Jesus said, let me pray for this young man to be healed. But the father said, heal my son if you can. And that was a little bit of doubt. He said, heal my son Jesus if you can. Jesus said, if I can. It says that, let me go back to it. Says all things are possible to him that believes. And so if you can, so basically what I'm trying to get to is that he had to deal with the father's heart before he was able to heal the son. And so God has to deal with our hearts before he's able to send the husband, before he's able to send the wife. He's not going to just smooth it over. God is not that type of God. He's going to get in there and he's going to do surgery before he's going to give somebody over to you. So
I want to add something to it.
It says, I find myself always settling. Honey, your heart is longing for something. Maybe you didn't have a father to love you the correct way. Maybe, like Danielle said, you don't understand your worth. But your heart will always settle until it meets the one who created it. You'll never understand your worth until you really understand who created love, who gave you the desire for love. So I just want to point you to Jesus right now, because you'll always settle and always look to some guy to fill the void that only Jesus can settle. And if you don't really know him, I just want to encourage you to get to know him. Seek his word, pray. If it's something that you want me to pray with you about, I'd be more than happy to. Me and Danielle would. But I just want to point you to Jesus. So, is that it?
I think just for time's sake, but I do want to answer you the rest of the people's questions. So I'm thinking maybe David, if you have time afterwards, maybe we can get in front of the camera and answer these questions. Okay, good. And it'll be on YouTube for those who put these questions. We're gonna start making it a habit because some of these questions are questions that people want answers now. And so after Unplugged, we're gonna probably go into a room, David, and we're gonna answer these questions for you, the questions we didn't get to. So let's go ahead and stand up and let's give it for our panel. And we'll go ahead and pray, get you guys home.